Okay, all right. Welcome everybody to In the Bin. It's been a long time, like 2-3 months probably. In our industry, the summer gets crazy, and unfortunately this is not high on my priority list. I enjoy doing it, but it's not necessarily the focus. I have a lot of other duties I have to do. But I'm super happy to be back. Today I have a very exciting guest, CarrieAnn Arias. Did I say that right? Arias. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Today I have a very special guest, CarrieAnn Arias. Did I get it?
You got it.
I got it. Okay. Who is the new CEO of the USA Pear Bureau. She has an extensive career in produce, which we'll get into. But first, thought it'd be great to kind of learn more about herself as an individual. So CarrieAnn, welcome.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. I appreciate that. It's weird to talk about myself not in the produce sense, but in the other side of what I do.
I've known you for 2 hours now, and you're pretty cool. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate that. I born and raised in California. Don't judge me for where I live.
No, that's cool.
I'm in the Salinas Valley, but that's not where I started. I grew up in the San Joaquin Valley. I've pretty much always been surrounded by agriculture.
Yeah.
Not ever thought I would work in it because my parents are not in agriculture, but that was where I landed, a long, circuitous route to get there.
Nice.
But I live on my golf course in California, and I'm an avid golfer and have been doing that for 12 years now. I wish I was way better.
I was going to say, how good are you?
Yeah, I wish I was way better. I mean, I'm decent. I'm
Okay.
decent. Yeah. Like I shoot in the 90s. So,
Okay, nice.
yeah.
That's a good day for me. If I'm under 100, I'm like happy.
yeah. I mean, I am too, because everybody explodes. Golf's not kind.
Do you feel like 18 holes of golf is too much? This is like an internal battle for me. Like, I get so tired after 16. I don't know about you. But like,
well, emotionally, there's got to be 3 holes you want to throw it anyway, at least, right? So sometimes 9 is too much.
Yeah?
Sometimes you should
Depends on
just
the
give
day.
up and go to the 19th hole and forget it completely for the day.
I should never leave the driving range.
Yeah. Actually, sometimes you leave your best golf on the driving range, and then you go out, and I was great on the driving range. And in my mind, it was this amazing route. And then you go out there, and it's like you should just sell your clubs.
Besides golf, what do you do for fun?
Oh, that's a great question. I grew up hunting and fishing,
Nice.
so not a normal
And you're from California?
girl.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just make sure.
only child, so I would hunt with my dad,
Nice.
and
What would you guys go for?
pretty much everything except I'm not a huge bird hunter, save turkeys.
Okay.
So, but I grew up deer hunting. We leased 10,000 acres and had the hunting rights to it near
Nice.
Yosemite. And so that's where I kind of grew up. My
Wow.
first memories of hunting were going out quail hunting, and it was just early,
Nice.
cold, and I didn't love it. But I wore a blue tutu, so I was rocking my outfit for that hunting experience. Yeah, so I've done that my whole life. I lost my dad a couple years ago, so I haven't been back out since I lost him, but I'm starting to get that bug again. I was driving around with Ray, one of your growers, and I was like, oh, this is where I would be hunting.
Yeah.
And he was like, wait, what? Yeah. So, yeah, not the normal California grow.
Right. That's cool.
And then my family, we owned a home in Mexico for many years. And so we fished in billfish tournaments. So I would fly down and we'd fish in a tournament, and then I'd fly back. My
Wow.
parents lived there for about half the year. And they
Dang.
did that for a very long time. So,
Wow.
yeah. So I love to fish. Any kind of fishing, I'm pretty happy. Except for bass fishing. I don't really love it. It was kind of boring.
God, that's my favorite. Man.
I used to just sleep on the boat and eat my parents' lunches when they weren't paying attention. I was not a big fan of.
I love smallmouth bass
Yeah,
fishing. Oh my gosh.
I have learned that I like to fish with frogs for bass because that's very exciting. So I
Yeah.
enjoy that.
Top water.
Yeah, all of those I have enjoyed, but I really love deep sea fishing, and
Okay.
I love stream fishing.
so fly fishing.
Yep,
and
yep, all
sweet.
things.
We'll have to go after this.
Yeah, so I
know you have a
actually
flight
need to.
this afternoon, but-
Yeah, we do, right? But my office in Portland's not that far away, and I need to bring a fly rod up here and leave it
Yeah.
in my office. Yeah, so
I mean, one of the greatest fly fishing rivers is right
right
over there.
here. Yeah, so definitely need to do that.
Nice. Well, that's cool. First impressions, I would not have expected you to be a hunter fisher, especially when you learn you're from California.
Yeah. Most people again, don't judge me for where I live. Yeah. But I do love it. Yeah.
So I might have missed it. What city exactly are you residing
So
in?
I'm technically, my address is Salinas, but I'm not in the city limits. I'm kind of out in the country a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. And so if I were to visit there, where should I go for lunch?
In Salinas.
Yes.
Oh, it depends on what you want.
I'm only there for one day. I got one lunch.
One day, one lunch. Lately, I've been sending people to Via Azteca, which is, it's not Mexican food in any traditional sense that you've ever seen, but there's something really special about it. It's family run. The recipes are from the kind of grandmother that seems to be in charge of the kitchen, but it's very unique. Like the mole, they have pink and yellow mole.
Good mole is hard to do, man.
And this is so different from anything you've ever had. It's just a very unique eating experience. But again, there's nothing traditional about it. Absolutely nothing. Cool. Guacamole has chicharron on it that's made out of ribeye. It's wild.
What?
Yeah, it's wild.
All right, I'll be there.
They have a lot of street tacos at lunchtime, so it's pretty fun. It's very different from their dinner menu.
Sounds like my type of place.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Before we get in, Brock, can you focus on these shoes that she's wearing here? Those are badass. It's the first thing I noticed when you came in this morning. I was like, what?
I do have a bit of a Doc Martin collection.
Yeah, what's the story there? What's the relation?
Well, I think my first pair was in high school, probably a junior in high school, and I do love them. But my other half, he is in several punk rock bands. It's not his career, but he does do that a lot. And so
more than one.
Yep. Yes. More than one. Two that are very active.
Okay.
And
I know who they are if I'm in the punk scene.
Yeah. If you were in the punk scene, I would venture to guess that you would at least know one of them, only because they've been around since '95. Okay. Which is ironic because they were 15 when they started that particular
name
band.
Drop?
So yeah, sure. Craig's Brother is the name of one band. They've traveled a lot. In fact, they played Red Bridge Fest, which is the biggest punk rock festival in Canada. They did that last year, which was very, very cool. Yeah. And then Too Bad Eugene is one of the other bands. The names are super weird. So
that one actually sounds familiar. Yeah. I'm not like a hardcore punk rock guy, but I enjoy the genre.
Mm-hmm. So I listened to it a lot when I was younger. It's very different. I really was kind of leaning more towards the ska side of things. Yeah,
that's kind of what got me into it.
Which I absolutely love. The Mad Caddies, like I'm obsessed. And they played at that festival too up in Canada, which was amazing. But yeah, so it's. I never thought I would be in this genre or this scene at all. I had no clue what I was in for, but it's been very fun. I really enjoy it. And, I get to listen to the music before it's recorded, and they keep churning out albums. And they just did a couple days in Southern California, and which has been pretty awesome for them.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Brock just revealed to us that he's in a band. Plays drums in this band, and we were like, well, play some of your songs. He's like, oh, it's not that good, I'm too embarrassed, it's awkward. Puts it on, and it's like really good. Like one guy walked by the marketing area, and he's like, what is that? I was like, this is Brock's original music. He's like, all right.
That is awesome. Very cool. What genre is it?
It's like alternative rock, sort of. I mean, what would you classify it as? Not alternative, more a little heavier.
I've showed people, they're like, oh, it's kind of like heavier Weezer. I don't know.
Yeah, heavy Weezer.
Yeah. Okay.
But our vocalist doesn't sound like him. He's more, I don't know.
Well, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Now he has to do a live show for us.
Yeah, now you need to do a live show.
Okay, well, thank you. That's a good picture of sure. You and your life.
Yeah.
The punk rock hunter from Salinas, California.
Golfer.
Yes. Hunter, golfer, fisher, who is now leading the USA Pear Bureau. So
yes.
I feel a little bit better. So let's get into your work career.
Sure.
I mentioned to you that your LinkedIn page is like an all-star top 10. It's good.
Thank you.
So maybe walk us through your work career, not just in produce, but how you got here.
Sure.
Kind of.
Strange route too. I have a lot of strange routes. I actually I said I grew up in San Joaquin Valley. Everybody was in agriculture, all my friends. I just wasn't. And my major in college originally was forensic psychology. Long before CSI and all those things, I just thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it is cool.
Yeah. It's I am a huge true crime fan because of that. But in the early 90s, the FBI stopped taking interns, and that's when I was in college. And our advisor kind of set us down and was like, "Listen, you're going to end up in like something much less ideal than your visions and hopes and dreams for your career." Yeah. And I really did not want to keep doing the school I wanted to go do, not sit in school. As much as I love to continue to learn, I was ready. And
was that kind of like around the whole like September 11th?
No. I'm way older than that.
Oh,
But thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, it seems like FBI during that time.
Yeah. No, this was like in 93.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I had taken a ton of business classes, ag classes, much to my father's chagrin that I wasn't a business major to start with. So I think he was appeased that I ended up going the organizational psychology route. So it was not a huge leap. It was more business classes, more statistics classes, which for those that do know me know that I love data. Like I'm kind of a data nerd. So not surprising that I enjoyed all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I was actually had a job before I graduated from Cal. I went to Cal Poly. Also went to a huge ag school. But this is never all my friends again in ag, not me. And I was hired to be a corporate trainer for Kinko's back when it was the original Kinko's owned by Paul Orfila and 92 partners. So it was a really strange, wild business model. The bells on the doors, this is your history lesson for Kinko's. The bells on the doors were so that the person that was the most sober back in the day could go out and meet the customers. That's why they had bells on their doors at Kinko's. So I loved it. The story, it's a great story of he was a dropout from UC Santa Barbara. They never honored him with a degree, so he built the Paul Orfila School of Business at Cal Poly. But great experience. But I realized that path was leading me towards human resources, which meant lots of complaining, which I don't do well. So, I mean, I was going into psychology. Everybody was dead. I didn't have to talk to anybody. It was perfect. So to pick HR was not wise for me.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to leave Kinko's and work for an art and interior design company in sales and marketing.
Nice.
It was fantastic, super fun. It was how I found my calling, quite frankly.
Cool.
And you brought up September 11th. So I, back in the .com heyday, they were printing money.
Yeah.
And which was pretty wild. They had nothing but money to burn, and they spent a lot of money on art. And that was why the business was so wildly successful. We had huge corporate clients that were, investing millions of dollars in art for their offices up in San Francisco. And I lived in Salinas, but was commuting up there because it was worth it. Financially, it was worth it. It was just unbelievable time. And that all came to a screeching halt when 9/11 happened. And so I had to do some reassessment about what I wanted to do when I grew up. Even then. And I lived in Salinas where all this produce was, but I was on the road like 4-5 hours a day going up to the Bay Area. Oof. And I had the opportunity to become an assistant to an owner of a produce company. Nice. And the assistant title didn't last very long. And I was working in their food service division pretty quickly. But yeah, I started with a company called Fresh Network. And I have run into Derek Dirtavanis, who was my boss, a couple of times. And I have thanked him repeatedly because I wouldn't be where I was today without him giving me a chance. Because I had no experience. I didn't know anybody. I was.
Were you kind of hesitant to get into ag, being surrounded by it, but never involved? You said your whole childhood and early adult, you kind of avoided ag.
I mean, not intentionally avoided. It just, It
didn't line up.
It just didn't, it didn't seem like... it just didn't seem like I belonged because I didn't grow up in it. You know, I mean, so many of my friends are like third, fourth generation. I was like, yeah, I'm like an accountant and an electrical contractor's daughter. Like I don't belong. Like I didn't feel like I belonged. But now being in this for as many years as I have, I will say that if you eat, you're involved in agriculture.
That's great.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and wear clothes, a detail. So yeah, I didn't understand, I think, until I got into it, and I loved it.
Nice.
I absolutely loved it. All my volunteerism is in agriculture. So yeah, I've just ridiculously passionate about it. I also think it might be an addiction to work in the produce industry.
It kind of, yeah, I know what you're saying.
Or a mental illness. I'm not sure. It's one of those things. Because I could not imagine doing anything else.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
Addiction's a good word for it.
Yeah.
You kind of get used to it and you start to crave it. And
you
it's
do.
Just the tempo and
yeah,
it's hard to change from that. So how long were you at that first produce position? I know there's a whole lot between that and
there
today.
is that a whole lot. I worked in food service, so you learn a lot of commodities, right? Really fast, you have to. I had some great customers. Applebee's was so cool to work with, and and helping their chefs optimize menus. It was just, and I love to cook. We didn't talk about that earlier, but I do cook a lot, and it was a unique experience that kind of fed into something that I was passionate about. So I think that was also what helped hook me into the business. And they sold off that division, the food service division of their business. There was also some really cool technology that they had at the time. That they were selling as well, but it was also the people, like we didn't have a place in that company anymore. And I started interviewing at Dole, and my boss's name was Carrie too, which was great. We call each other twin all these years later. And it was to work in a true CPG brand right out of the gate in produce.
That's a big jump from.
It was huge.
From food service.
It was huge.
To Dole.
Yeah. I've gone back to Cal Poly a couple of times, and I've never spoken to my own department, but I have spoke to students that are ag business majors at Cal Poly, and I talk about making leaps in your career, and sometimes the best decision you can make is to just close your eyes and jump.
Yeah.
And, if you might land well, you might not, but it's better than not trying and not taking that opportunity.
Like that.
So my leap to Dole was a massive one.
Yeah,
and
I bet.
Not a traditional marketer. A lot of psychology. Use that every day, especially with salespeople, which is who I was working with the most. But it was working in what was account-specific marketing at the time. Okay. So this is pre-loyalty card.
Gotcha.
Loyalty cards hadn't really started up much. You had your Blockbuster card, right? But, that did not count. They could only tell you if you hadn't turned your VHS in on time, right? So, we had a unique moment when loyalty cards came out and shopper marketing became a thing, because now you're talking about behavior, and that's where my psychology kicks in. Yeah, so full circle, all of a sudden my degree makes sense. I think my dad was foiled at that moment in time, right? Like, oh, it mattered, right? So it was figuring out how to change consumers' behavior over time was just the coolest opportunity. But I had made a promise to myself that I was going to be a VP before I was 40.
Oh. It's a good goal.
I was 39 and a half when it happened.
Hey, it counts.
Yeah, it totally counted. But I definitely believe in setting goals. I was an athlete for many years. I swam competitively, and the goal setting mindset was really a big deal for me. I feel like it doesn't drive everybody, but for those of us that it drives us, you're going to find a way.
Yeah.
Like,
keeps you accountable to yourself.
Yeah. And when you fail, you fail yourself first. So you better fail fast and move on, right? Or it's going to eat you up. But another psychology moment. But for me, that was a big drive. And I had very fortunate, a lot of great mentors that knew my vision and helped me figure out how to get there. Some moments were just an absolute bummer in my career. It was like, I really don't want to do this job. Like, I didn't want to do this, but they were like, listen, you've got to learn this part of the business before you can take that next leap. And so the tough love when I was at Dole was great too, to help me kind of fight my way through it to the top. It was a great moment. It was a great moment.
39 and a half. Where'd you go?
I was at Dole. I stayed at Dole. I was promoted
okay.
inside of the
Oh,
organization.
nice.
Yeah, which was
Sweet.
really cool. Loved it.
Yeah, wow.
A great opportunity because the vegetable berry salad side of the business that I was on, we were also sharing marketing efforts with the commodity tropical side of the business. So bananas and pineapples, we all came into the mix. It was super cool.
Nice.
And
they do so much over there. It's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. But it's also very deep rooted in traditional CPG marketing, which to me was really helped set the stage. And there's so few produce companies that have the ability to do that or have the bandwidth, whether it's financial, staff, or even desire, right? Because we become very transactional in produce and we tend to kind of step away from our brand a little bit more than we probably should.
Yeah.
But branding is expensive.
It's tough too, especially with a lot of private label things these days. When I first started here, there was like one private label bag, and now there's like 20.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and that's only 8 years.
Yeah.
And so we've lost a lot of our brand out there. At the end of the day, we're selling fruit. We want to move volume, and so whatever it takes to get it out the door. But at the same time, we're kind of weakening our own brand position by putting them into private labels and stuff.
Yeah,
so
then your brand reputation is with the retailer versus the consumer. It's interesting because this is not the first time. It cycles.
Oh, really?
I think it was late 70s, early 80s, we had generic, right? And then it was like, it just said like toilet paper, beer, right?
Beer,
it was,
the white can.
or the yellow and black or white and black cans. It was the original OG of private label.
Yeah.
Terrible stuff, right? It was just like horrible, but economically at that time, those products, helped families survive. Let's be fair.
Yeah.
But we've had moments where private label rose really high in produce, and then some sort of incident happens, often foodborne, and then all of a sudden retailers want out. They don't want anything to do with private label. They want it in your brand.
Okay.
And I've seen that happen a couple of cycles in my career. The private label salads come and go. Yeah. So I don't know. I often worry about, from a produce branding perspective, how does the brand survive when you only have a little tiny PLU sticker, right? The commodity world is even tougher. Dole had a lot of pull through because they had cans and frozen bags and all these things for all those years. The brand maybe started fresh and freshened and canned, but their heritage was a little different. There's other brands that have been around for over 100 years, but they're very trade driven. Yeah. And the only people that know the brand sometimes are even the growers that grow for you because of that tiny sticker. So I do worry about the dilution of that. And I think that, stepping into the role that I'm in today is even more, now I'm representing all these brands. Yeah. And how does the word pear become a brand?
Right.
So yeah, I do think about that a lot. But I've witnessed the success of other brands. When I left Dole and moved to Naturipe, the brand was having its 100th anniversary, right? But it didn't start out as a brand of blueberries, and they have an avocado division and all this stuff. I mean, they were strawberry growers. There was a co-op. The Naturipe berry growers is really where the brand came from. It wasn't until, I think, they're probably 38 years old now, but they merged together with other growers to build out, and they decided that Naturipe was the right brand to use. It wasn't the one they started using. I think they started out when they merged, the four organizations merged together. It was called Global Berry Farms.
Not as cool.
Which not as cool. And at that moment in time when they did that, we had incidents with green onions in Mexico. Everybody wanted, U.S. product. Labeling started to happen. People were shunning in the grocery store anything that was grown outside of the United States. And that's a personal choice that people still are willing to make. But also, I think a lot of people don't realize that you can't get blueberries year round from domestically,
Right.
right? They has to come from other countries. While they can go into cold storage, it's not like an apple or a
Right.
pear where
Not
it can
that
be in
long.
cold storage. Yeah, not that long. So, but it also, there's something that all ships rise, and having year-round product for something like a blueberry or an apple or a pear, that is so that you keep consumption going, so you stay top of mind to consumers. Yeah. So having that outside influence of those other countries providing that, so there wasn't a gap at shelf, I mean, it could be good or bad, right? We've certainly trained consumers that nothing almost is special anymore. Cranberries, they're the ones that come and go. A persimmon, right? Weird things that you don't eat very often. Yeah. Those are the only things that come and go in produce anymore. Right. Now everybody demands everything all the time. And that is not how the rest of the world eats, but it is how North America eats. So, when we redid the Naturipe brand, refreshed it, we were trying to find a balance between its history and its future. And I think that it's really important to remember the heritage. And, that was the first time I really worked directly for growers. I was at Dole. I maybe knew 4 growers the entire time I was there. 13 years, and you don't know any farmers. It's strange,
it's
right?
Really crazy.
You're just so removed from it in comparison. And to have all of a sudden, 400 plus people really technically being your boss,
right.
You think about the industry very differently. You think about what you're doing as a brand very differently, and that heritage of many generations of farmers, right? Yeah. Remember I said in the beginning, I didn't feel like I fit it in because I wasn't one of those multi-generational growers, but that's who you're working for. Right. That who you hope the brand helps support over time. Coming into this, part of the attraction was really that it was directly working for all the growers. I love it. I've spent my first 2 months, 61 days today. That's what I've spent doing, is meeting everybody.
Yeah.
Because I take that very seriously. I think that
this is the best way to start it too, is going around and meeting all of the growers and
all the personalities.
Yeah.
I know they're listening. There's a lot of you. You're a lot of personalities.
Nice. Okay, so what did the refresh of the brand at Naturipe entail? What, was it the full scope packaging?
It was 18 months of time invested into getting us to that point. A lot of consumer research, understanding consumer behavior around the products that they sold.
So it started with research.
Very heavy into the research, mainly because there was kind of a void of that within the organization. They just hadn't done that in a very long time, and not in the way, because the processes weren't available then, right? So even though they had done the work, you didn't have some of the technology. I mean, we literally had people out in the stores taking pictures of things they loved and didn't love, and sending us photos of the berry patch, which is what we call it in a grocery store, photographing the berry patch and having actual conversations via their phone experience. That was not available. We did not research using your smartphone, right? So that was certainly a part of it. We also really wanted to understand how the products interacted with each other and with other things in the produce department.
Interesting.
I think it's important to have that value when you're talking to a retailer about what belongs together. First of all, it helps us from recipe development, merchandising, those types of things. But it also helps the retailer understand, if you put these 3 things together on an ad, well, these are things that are in the basket together. So then the decision becomes, do you want to promote them all at the same time? Right. Or should you stagger that promotion so that you get more repeat purchase, right? Lots of different ways that retailers decide they do or don't want to do that, right? So you can only show them the options, and then they're going to decide they're going to do what they want to do. It's always year-over-year sales. You got to beat last year, right?
Gosh,
you hear that all the time, all the time. You're like, well, Easter moved an entire month. It's hard.
It was a whole different crop last year.
Yeah. Mother Nature didn't take her Xanax. Where we have all these problems that happen with our crops. It's just the reality of it. But for Naturipe, we really needed to dig into that. And we also recognize that the brand in its original was really focused on trade, not on what consumers wanted, right? It was delivering to a trade audience, and it had been that way for a very, very long time. So part of what we were certainly wanted to make sure was that we were listening to the consumer's vision of the brand and what the brand meant and where the brand could and couldn't play. Not every brand belongs in everything.
Right.
And that is hard for, I think, a lot of times owners and boards to understand that sometimes your brand just simply doesn't belong someplace or in a category. You don't have the right to be there. And consumers are going to decide that, not you. You might have all the money in the world, but it doesn't mean that they're going to respect you living in that physical space, right? So, and there's lots of big CPG brands that have learned that the hard way over the years. So, you know, we don't have that kind of money in produce. Nobody does,
Yeah,
you know?
I was just thinking it's so hard to extract that consumer data without doing that extensive research and learning about it.
Yeah.
I mean, to discover the consumer's opinion of your product after you've already launched it, it's just like
that's
scary.
It's too late. It's too late. If you don't know beforehand, it's too late.
Yeah.
You can't, because it's really hard to take it back, and it's such an expensive investment, right? Redoing all the labels. I mean, in the berry category, you might buy 2 years worth of labels at once because you're trying to hedge your bet on prices, and certain products are packed out in the field, they don't come into a plant, so they're pre-labeled. So you might have warehouses filled with clamshells. So it takes forever to get through old inventory, and then somebody finds a box somewhere, a roll of labels. You're like, man, I thought it was gone. You know, it's like it just haunts you. It keeps coming back year over year. So
that's so funny. You're talking my world right now. I know all about that. Just the other day, so we redid our PLU stickers in 2019 or 2020. So like 5 years ago. And just the other day, someone found a box of our old PLU stickers, which the content is the same, the barcode's the same, the logo is the same, but it's just like a different look. And they're like, can we use these? It's like, how many do you have?
And then you think, can I send them to another country? Right. Can we put those on a package that's going to go overseas or something like, you start to think about that. And at some point you just hope that it gets cut off, but that's an investment that the growers made and you have to respect that. And our margins keep collapsing, right? Yeah. So asking them to throw stuff away is really hard.
Yeah, and we're going through it right now with a huge national apple retailer. They're changing their packaging from a box to a bag. And all of our warehouses have extensive inventory of these boxes, and they're not cheap. Yeah. And so we've done a good job of working through it. And you're never going to hit it perfectly on the head. There's always going to be something that gets left behind. But it's been like 6 months of making sure that everybody's used up their inventory and that we can transition together as one, so it's consistent for the retailer. It's been a struggle.
Well, 6 months would be a dream, because I can tell you every once in a while something would pop up. I'm like, where did that come from? And it's been 3 years since the new label had been out. But
wow.
Yeah, I mean, again, though, you have to help them work through it, and maybe you're redirecting it to, a retailer that's regional or to kind of isolate that. But there's also a sustainability story about not throwing that stuff away, right? I know that's part of your wheelhouse, and that's a struggle to have that conversation. And the more pressure that we get from retailers around the sustainability piece, I think it deters some brands from making a leap, because it's just, they're not going to maintain their status.
To your point there, I have noticed, we were talking about private label earlier. It used to be when they would come out with a new artwork, it was like, you have 2 weeks to transition, and then we want the new bag. Like, doesn't matter how many of the old ones you have, we want the new ones. Now that sustainability is front and center, they're kind of like, okay, you have time to work through everything. As long as the UPCs are the same, you have... work through it. Don't throw it away. Don't recycle it. We'll use it. And I think that's just because they're more conscious about the waste, really, when they change labels.
But there is a retailer that I know of in the country that allows you to, the way that they've done their private label, you technically could use it somewhere else if you needed to redirect product.
Dang.
Yeah. I thought it was really brilliant.
Yeah.
They're a pretty unique retailer unto themselves anyway, but having that opportunity so that if you needed to move through something, you could. And it's tough. It's tough with unique UPC codes versus
Right.
PLUs too,
Right.
right? Once you get into unique UPC code, it changes things.
Tough.
Yeah. So, and berries way back in the day, everybody had the same. We didn't have unique codes. It was a generic UPC code we all used. So, yeah.
Apples used to be like that too. 10 years ago, it was the PMA at the time. Now the IFPA had generic UPCs that everybody could use. We all shipped the same UPCs to all these customers, and now it's each company has their own UPCs.
In the era of so much data that we don't know what to do with all of it, it is nice to know your product, how it sells versus somebody else's, though.
Well, and for traceability reasons too.
Yeah.
Food safety. I understand why they do it, but it'd be kind of nice to all use the same
Same
thing.
one, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so while you were at Dole and at Naturipe, what'd you think about pears?
I mean, I grew up eating them,
Okay.
which is, I think, not all that common, but my mom grew up eating them. So pears were a normal thing to consume in my household. But we never had them. So I've never, this is my first foray into pear world. So I've definitely been trying to learn as fast as I can. When they started talking about pressure, I was like, what? What is this? Now we did test in blueberries, right? We were
Right.
looking at that too. So, I just didn't know that there was this really cool thing you stabbed a pear with in 3 different places to figure out the pressure to know whether you harvest it. It was just completely foreign to me. I guess I didn't realize the headwinds that pears have. It is interesting to me that consumers don't know if a pear is ripe or not.
Yeah.
Because you just give it a little squeeze,
It
right?
seems obvious to us.
It does seem obvious to us. Well, but I'm a longtime consumer, so
Right.
I get why I understand it. But everybody figured out avocados, so I don't see why they can't figure out pears. And maybe we're not giving the consumer enough credit. I don't know. 61 days. I'm not sure what my opinion is on it yet, but there's certain.
Well, you're on the right track.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting. There's also this ripening debate, right? I did have bananas and avocados in my world. So, do you ripen at the point of ship? Do you ripen upon arrival? Right? Avocado toast means there's no ripening rooms with availability in these terminal markets. And so there's definitely something to be said about that. But I think the consumer is smart enough. I think we need to figure out how to talk to them.
Nice. Okay. So 61 days.
Yeah.
Does it feel like an eternity?
I have to say, it's not how I thought my first 61 days
Really?
would go. No, but I'm sure like best laid plans, right? But being out and meeting everybody that I possibly could in this short period of time has been really important. Spending time with my team. I'm very fortunate. My staff is amazing. And getting to know them and, their personalities. I'm a new person coming in after all these years.
Yeah.
I'm sure that it's slightly terrifying for
Yeah.
them. Right? Well, God, they have to learn the new person. So, yeah, I think the people part has been the most important part because you can't ever change that.
Well, I'm sure
you can't go backwards.
It's the same in berries and avocados and bananas. It's all about produce is all about people. And so you're not going to be able to do a good job if you don't know the people.
Yes. Yeah. I there's this book called The First 90 Days that when I became a VP was given to me as a gift, a parting gift. And it doesn't really help you a whole lot if you've been a manager before, but I thought it was very interesting because it does really kind of hone it on, you're going to build a plan. And the most important thing that you can do is be comfortable with throwing that whole plan out the window. But you also only have one shot at meeting people and starting to build those relationships. And, it's not like everything has to be roses and sunshine and rainbows because it's not.
Yeah, definitely not.
And you're not always going to agree with everybody. That's really irrelevant, quite frankly. To me, it's more about that connection so that when we do try to move the needle and make changes and build upon the legacy of the industry, that you have the legs to stand on to do it.
Yeah.
The board has been amazing. They really have been.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Definitely a cast of characters. And
Yeah?
But everybody has answered the phone when I called.
Good.
That might change over time.
Only for the first 90 days.
Caller ID. Yeah, they're out. Yeah.
91
we'll see how the
days,
first board meeting goes.
good luck.
They might not answer the phone anymore.
So before this, we were kind of touching on trade shows. Being in produce, trade shows are huge for us.
The necessary evil.
We love them. We hate them, but they're necessary evil. Do you have any favorite shows or ones that in your career have been the most valuable for you?
Yeah, we were talking about Asia Fruit Logistica and Fruit Logistica. So Asia Fruit Logistica, right? People are on planes right now. What an amazing experience. People see food very differently, right? And being in Asia and the Asian market, I think is really fascinating in the way that they do things because they shop so differently from us and different from Europe too. But to meet people and you need a translator and remembering to hold your business card with two hands and those types of things that just like the business etiquette of
Hold your
of
business
Asia.
card with two
Yeah,
hands?
you don't hand a card with one hand, you hand it with both hands.
It's like offensive to not.
Yeah, well, yeah, certain countries
Wow.
and cultures, yeah. So
I'd be screwed.
it's the writing is facing towards them, and you
Wow.
use both hands to hand it to them. Yeah, I was fortunate. I had a great mentor the first time I went to Asia Fruit Logistica that helped me through all the things.
Yeah.
Who to bow to and not. I mean, not like curtsy bow, but that
Yeah.
the way that they nod.
We
pretty
were
exciting.
working on a Chinese New Year package last year, and it was Year of the Dragon. And I learned so much about the importance of claws on the dragon, if the dragon's mouth was open or not, and like all this stuff that like is traditional. And like I had no idea.
The colors are very
Yeah, the
important.
colors
Yeah.
don't use white and black. I think it was. It was like what?
It's a big deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never. I mean, I've been to Japan, but not like for work.
Yeah.
So I haven't got to experience it yet. But I did go to Berlin in February, and that was eye opening, I should say.
Every room's a different country.
Yeah, it was like this. It was a huge show, but it felt like a very small show because these like tiny gymnasium-sized rooms, but there's countries packed into them, and so you go from Egypt to Scotland to America to South America. It was crazy.
I mean, Italy, they dine, right? They have full dining room tables, and you actually have meals with,
At the
real
show?
silverware, and they serve wine. And I always wanted to have a reason to know somebody in the Italian pavilion. I was like, I want that for lunch. You go to France, everybody has a coffee maker, so you can.
It's funny
you
you
can
say
literally
that.
drown yourself in espresso while you're there if you'd like to.
When I was at Fruit Logistica, I forget which country building I was in, but I met one of our customers and they wanted to meet at someone's booth. It was some company at their booth, and they had like tables and silverware, and like people came up and served us, and like I don't work for them. I think the customer might have bought some stuff from them, and so maybe that's how I was able to get in. But it was like we were at a restaurant.
Yeah.
In the middle of a trade show.
In the middle of a trade show.
Like
Yeah.
napkins and here's your dessert and stuff. It's like, what?
Breaking bread is still a real thing in other countries that we do business. We're very transactional in the United States typically.
Yeah.
Except at trade shows where you get to entertain, right?
Well, even that's going away too, some of that. Like
because the retailers can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like our top 20, it's getting harder and harder to find people that you can take out for like an experience or a dinner or something.
Yeah.
Or if you do, you have to split it, which is fine. It's about spending time with the person, not buying them a meal. But it's just getting harder.
That's where you could play golf instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or go hunting.
Or go hunting. Yeah. I don't know if I'd want to give some of my customers
True.
a weapon.
invite-
Over the years, you might want to think through that one.
I invite every customer I meet to go skiing and go fishing.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Fruit Logistica is certainly a great cultural experience for without a doubt. I used to go there though for innovation ideas.
Yeah.
So I love to see what other countries are
That's
doing.
exactly why I went, was
Yeah.
to look at packaging innovation, because Europe's always 5 years ahead of us.
Yeah, but they haven't figured it out in pears.
No.
They're more complicated and use more packaging than we
I
do.
know. Yeah. It's funny. I walked into, when I got there in Berlin, first thing I did is go to a store, and I was expecting to not see a lot of plastic, but I saw a lot of plastic, a lot of overwrap. So they'll have like the the paperboard tray, and then they'll overwrap it in plastic. It's so much material. But you hear about Europe, being so anti-plastic and not using plastic, but walking into the store, it's everywhere.
Yeah, they are addicted to flow wrap.
Yeah.
And it's just not even efficient for us in the U.S. anyway. I mean, there's sometimes you would see it, but the flow wrap machine business is still thriving over there.
It's so weird.
It is bizarre. And while they are leading the charge in the anti-plastic movement, their stores prove that there isn't another solution still, right? And there's a lot of like pulp fiber punnets, and it works in some categories. Tomatoes have thrived in alternative packaging environments, but a lot of us don't have the ability to take that leap. Right. And as we look at the potential to lose the bags in Canada, that's terrifying.
Yeah, that keeps me up at night.
Yeah. I mean, every time I see that Kathy's going to Canada, I just like, oh, bless you, women. Good luck.
Please.
Yeah, please. You're the voice of the farmer. You know more than they do.
I saw
please win.
Last year, I think it was, they decided to put a hold on it for like 12 months or something because Big Oil from Canada had like stepped in and said, from a financial standpoint, like, we're against this because obviously they produce plastic. And I was like, for the first time in my life, I was happy that Big Oil helped the farmers out.
I mean, there is not a solution that doesn't have a negative impact,
right?
In another respect.
Yeah, well, if you look at like using corrugate instead of plastic, the carbon emissions of it is like 10 times.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It's just crazy. The amount of water and energy to produce paper versus plastic, it just doesn't pencil. And so if your whole thing is like global emissions, then maybe getting rid of plastic isn't the greatest way. On that point, though, we need to be able to recycle the plastic.
Yeah.
That's the USA's biggest problem is we can't do anything with it.
Well, we can, but the individual municipalities have the right to do whatever they want. And that's where, that the 5 cents for a plastic bottle deposit that we have in some states, I'm not a fan of the federal government telling us what to do, but there's something that might be said about that one might not be such a bad idea. I think that we've seen municipalities where it works.
Right.
And the fact that we have the water bottle industry that is taking all of the recycled PET into their own because of their mandates around the percent of recycled plastic in those bottles, it's impacting us on our side because we don't have the pockets that they have to recover some of that PET. And so, as we are being asked to do these sustainability audits and more retailers are jumping onto that bandwagon and they're looking for a percentage of recycled PET in our clamshells, we're in trouble because there isn't enough. And I mean, back in the day, we used to send it to China, right? Then they stopped taking it. But we have it. We're just not recovering it.
Right.
And until that recovery is required, we're going to
a lot of those, like Coca-Cola, for example, they've built their own recycle centers. Well, they will collect the PET
themselves.
Yeah. To feed their new products and stuff.
Well, and they're paying the municipalities that are willing to capture it and bundle it. They're paying for it. So, and there's a lot of, people in the produce industry, packaging companies in the produce industry that are actively working on this. Yeah. They're definitely fighting the good fight. I think for us, it's making sure that the retailers and the packaging companies and the brands are all aligned in what's realistic. Because right now we're starting to put mandates in place that aren't realistic. Right. We're also getting legislation in certain states that is wildly unrealistic, but of course it's being made by, people that read one Google article and think they're experts. So, we continue to let them lead the charge though. So, yeah.
What's your opinion on Walmart Gigaton?
I mean, listen, it's certainly been an interesting exercise, right? So it was, it consumes an entire person for almost a full year. It's almost a full staff. It's almost a full-time staff position. Yeah. At Naturipe, we had a sustainability expert. Janice McIntosh is literally one of the most brilliant people I know in the world of sustainability. She's been doing it since the 70s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she certainly was my rock in all of that. But I certainly think that there's a place for it, but every year to ask for something more.
Right.
At some point we're going to hit a ceiling where there isn't any more that we can give, and you're going to start pricing farmers out of the business.
What I find interesting is that they hit their goal like 5 years early of
I know
of like $1 billion.
Because we were doing everything we could.
Everybody kicked ass.
We hit it.
But they've like added more onto it, and it's now you have to submit more and more stuff. Like last year we did our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions for the first time. That was like impossible for me to figure out. I got it done. But now I'm thinking eventually we're gonna have to start doing scope 3 emission, which I don't
even know how to get. Well, once you get to scope 3, farmers are out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're just not set up to do that.
Well, and as a country, our production is such that it would not. It's going to fail scope 3. I can't imagine how it won't fail in every aspect, in everything that we grow. To me, the first thing that we should get is credit for feeding people.
Yeah.
That should be the number one priority and put us in front of everything else. It should offset. The fact that we're feeding should offset what's happening because they're not recognizing that. Yeah. It's just like, we're not the same as T-shirts.
Right.
Or
dog food.
Or any. So we've lost sight of that piece of it. And I think we're just losing sight of some of the sanity. Having the IFPA a part of the conversation, it does help lift up all of the growers and gives them a bigger voice, but they're still not as big as Coke or Pepsi. So you're always going to have those brands kind of driving the conversation, and we should get credit as an industry for being not only life sustaining, but we're necessary.
Right.
I mean, as much as I love a good cherry Coke, that is not necessary and life-sustaining.
Right.
But what we do is
fresh produce.
Yeah, fresh produce. I mean, I think meat and dairy. I put everything fresh. The perimeter, right, is really life-sustaining. I recognize for everybody that's thinking, well, alcohol's in the perimeter. That's life-sustaining too for some of us. We need that. That's mental health. Not for everybody.
Good and bad.
But for those of us it is. But I think about the perimeter, and that's we're not processed. We're doing all the things that we possibly can right. And by the way, everything in Center Store that's processed started with one of us too. So
true. We make all the ingredients.
We make all the ingredients. Yeah. So, we have the people, planet, profit, but don't forget pressure. And that seems to be the one that everybody seems to ignore.
I like that.
Yeah.
Now, you're 61 days, right? You picked a rough crop to start.
Perfect timing.
Did you know that when you were applying
When I was applying, no.
Okay.
But
they didn't tell you that.
They did not. When I accepted the job, I was actually in Singapore on vacation. Nice. And I got the phone call, and they made the offer, and I came back from vacation and accepted the offer. And then they invited me to a meeting before I started. So I was literally in the meeting, the car's packed, Mom and I are leaving on a golf vacation. My last vacation before I start my job. So it was the middle of June, of which I hear the budget for the first time and being called down from 12 million to 10 to 9 to 8.
Because it's tied to the crop.
Yeah, right? So our budget's tied to the crop. And I went, what in the heck's going on, right? Like, what happened? And, I read, hey, Mother Nature, she does whatever she wants.
Right.
She typically doesn't behave herself most of the time. And so I wasn't fully surprised, but just because of the Mother Nature side of things. But I really had no idea. And so immediately after the call is over, and I'm thinking, well, this is my first time. Like, let's not make too many assumptions. I'm going to go on vacation and play golf. I got a phone call from one of the board members, and he was like, I swear to you that we did not it wasn't intentional.
Right.
It wasn't not disclosed. I think maybe he saw the look on my face and thought, uh-oh.
Well, you probably had all these like great ideas while you were applying and thinking like, oh, this is what I'm going to do to the industry. And then you walk in and it's like, oh, your budget's half.
Yeah, literally half. Although it does seem to be in some of the regions better than what their original estimates were. And, when I hear things like, the adjusters are out in the field, insurance, right? So not knowing where everybody lands, some people still don't even know if they're going to harvest, right? Yeah. So we're still very much in flux, but that's agriculture. I've said this a couple of times. You don't go to Vegas to meet a gambler. You go to a farm. So like they're the ultimate. They're the ultimate. It's the ultimate gamble. And it's every year, and it's your livelihood, and it's your family's livelihood, and your employees, and all those things. Yeah. There is no greater risk taker than a farmer. So
than the people feeding us.
Yeah, and it's the people feeding us. So vote accordingly.
Yeah.
I think that for me, it's just another challenge, right? What an opportunity to come in like the worst crop in 40 years.
I'll tell you what, it'll make next year look easy.
Yeah. Or not, right? Well, yeah.
We'll science see. Of trees.
Yeah, she better behave herself, Mother Nature. I think that this is certainly an opportunity for everybody to get closer together too. Yeah. So
that's a good point. And we're already starting to see that too.
Yeah. With crisis comes camaraderie. Yeah. And that's certainly, I think that there already is some of that though. Everybody seems to know everybody, and they grew up with their competitors, right? They went to high school together, all those things, So I think that there's something about that as well. But, I'm excited, even though it is a challenge. I mean, why not? I mean, why not? It's almost better that it's this year than 2 years in, when you have all your plans are fully in motion, they're fully baked, and you're running.
True.
Yeah. So
can you share some of those plans that you're thinking? What's your target?
I would like pears to find their personality.
Okay.
Pears to me don't really have one.
What is something that has a personality, just so we can compare it?
Well, I think the mandarin industry is a great example, right? Cuties and halos and all those definitely have a personality. Sure. It doesn't mean that it only is targeting one type of consumer per se, but you certainly expect them to be fun and lighthearted, and whatever character you see on the box, right? It makes you smile a little bit. We don't quite have that. But if you look at pears in Italy have they're sexy, they're funny, they're self-deprecating. They have all these kind of like unique experiences with them. And I follow a lot of pear brands in Italy, and you can do that too. I've found a bunch of them on LinkedIn. Yeah. Very interesting that they have found a way to create a character, if you will, out of a commodity.
And so are they doing that on the packaging, or just,
I see it? No, actually,
just the experience.
It's their social media.
Okay.
It is certainly how they talk to their retail, their trade. Yeah. You're going to go to Fruit Logistica next year and look at it from a totally different lens. I tell you, because I did that, especially because it's all in Italy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of the decisions were probably made drinking wine, but that's fine.
That's okay.
But I thought you certainly can.
That's why they're good ideas.
Yeah. Yes. Perimeter. I'm telling you. Yeah. I'm looking forward to the moment where USA Pears is known for that identity. The word pears should be a brand in itself.
Yeah.
You see other brands doing that. Avocados has certainly done that. Whether it's avocados from Mexico or California, right? There's certainly that divide. Right. They're both fighting for share at shelf. We don't have that. It's just us, right? So that opportunity, I think, is really big. So that's my first.
Okay.
It maybe not the first thing that you'll outwardly see, but that's certainly a goal of mine. I would like to see that because I do think for a category that is widely, in my mind, misunderstood, I think that we need to get people's attention, and I think that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential for that.
Yeah.
with the current status of it. Do you think apples have personality?
I certainly think that they do.
More so than pears?
More so than pears, but it comes from two different things. First of all, apples I think are more commonly consumed, right, by most people. Definitely. So there's a little bit different expectation. But now you have a lot of brands. You have a lot of brand recognition by variety.
Right.
Wine has that, but strawberries don't, right? So it just depends on, I think, how you lean into that. Apple industry is a little different because they're right now inundated with varieties to the point where I don't think consumers quite know what to do with it, right? I think the grape industry is the one that's really starting to make some headway with varieties, and they do it a little differently because it's scarcity. It's only a couple weeks.
Right.
You better find that grape you love, and then you run off. But the cotton candy grape made that point of entry realistic.
Yeah,
right.
I did.
I love the goblin grape. If whoever that grower is listening to this,
I don't know that one.
It's like a long black grape. It's like a fingerling grape. It's like 2 bites or 3 bites. They're giant. They usually come out in October, right before Halloween. That's the name.
Nice, good timing.
Absolutely. Like I will consume as many as I possibly can, and then they're gone.
I'm gonna try them.
Yeah, you gotta find them. They're fantastic. So yeah, I do think that apples have a personality. It's kind of more by variety a little bit at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's every day. I mean, I don't know that bananas really have a personality, and that's kind of an everyday thing too.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they do. It's funny you mentioned varieties with grapes. I'm starting to see that in berries, like blueberries specifically. Retailers have talked about highlighting like a special label for a certain variety, Calypsos or whatever. If it's a Fall Creek variety, whatever it is. We've kind of been hesitant to get into that just because the windows are so short on some of those varieties. But I'm hearing a lot of demand on it too. Not just blueberries, but cherries also too. Aldi, which is a huge national retailer, does a Skeena label, and it's like 3 weeks out of the season, but it's listed at a premium price and it's a premium package. We're kind of starting to see that bleed over into blueberries and stuff too. So
in Europe, they've been selling by variety on blueberries for a long time.
Really?
Yeah. So you go into like a Marks and Spencer, and on the label it'll be printed what the variety is. And when you go meet with those retailers, you do business with them in the blueberry world, they will slide a list across the table, and it's the varieties they will and won't take.
Really?
Yes. So that is certainly something that, will Europe lead the way here? Yeah. Potentially. I mean, that makes it tough, right, for the growers that don't have those varieties, and how many years you have to invest before that a new crop is viable and harvestable, right? There's certainly a lot of things that they're doing to grow in containers and speed up the process a little bit. But, I mean, there's growers that have 100-year-old bushes, and they're extremely proud of that, right? But it's a variety that nobody wants.
Yeah.
Then what do you do with that, right? So are you pricing your growers out of business because the addiction to new is such a big deal, right? But man, some of those new varieties are just unbelievable too. It's hard to deny. The ones that are like the size of the size of a quarter, right? You see this in your hand. You're like, these things are unbelievable. It's a 2-bite blueberry.
Yeah.
But do they eat right all the time? All those things.
Is it consistent?
Yeah, the consistency. Pears and blueberries have a very similar like headwind of consistent eating. And I think that at least for me, I came up with the blueberry side and part of the Blueberry Commission talking about that eating experience. And I come here and it's the same conversation, the eating experience being inconsistent. That's it. Consumers come and go. And when you're talking about, share of wallet, they're less likely to invest in you a second time if you've disappointed them.
Yeah, if they see it as a gamble or a risk on experience.
Especially when it's expensive.
Yeah, they're just going to pass on it.
Yeah, and there's a cheaper option next to it, right? So, cheaper doesn't necessarily mean better, but the cycle of getting them to come back and buy your product again if the eating experience is bad, it takes a long time for them to be willing to risk it.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're at the helm now. I'm
Thank
excited to see the future. Sorry about this crop, but I can almost promise you the next one will be better.
Well, unless you were the one out there setting things freezing, I think that you don't have to apologize. So, yeah, Mother Nature just got cranky with us. So,
Nice. Well,
and then she's hailed and wind and all sorts of things since I
she's
started.
done
Even
everything. This
yeah,
year.
yeah, and there's some snow.
The
I
heat,
think it's
the snow,
Yeah, yeah. The
everything.
hailstorm was wild. I'm really feeling for my very southern growers in Medford. It was the most beautiful orchards, and then I left on Saturday and Sunday. The hail came through, and then I get emails on Monday saying everything you walked. Yeah, it's pretty much we can't harvest it. It's gone.
I hate those
Yeah, it
emails.
just broke my heart.
Yeah, those are the worst.
So
Well,
she needs to behave herself.
well, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming to visit the team today.
Absolutely, it's
great to meet
fantastic.
you.
I love your setup here. This is really
Thank you.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, this is our little home studio.
Yeah. It's a great home studio.
It's been, what do you think, 2-3 months since we did one?
Yeah, since cherry.
It's been a while, man.
Right before cherries.
I told myself I couldn't do it during cherry season. So our cherry season's 3 months long. So.
Yes. And I know nobody sleeps for the entire 3 months. Yeah.
So, but it's good to be back. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Cut it.